Late checkout, early secrets. The first time I noticed Leela's new ritual, it wasn't the way she wore her hair or the floral note she brought home like a rumor. It was the way she put her phone face down, screen toward the table like a child punished to stare at the wall. My wife has always had tidy habits. She color codes our bookshelf and arranges the cutlery as if forks and spoons might audition. But this was choreography, not tidiness. The device landed, her finger hovered, the smallest pause followed by a smile that didn't quite use her eyes. I shoot weddings for a living. I'm the man who catches vows the way a net catches a falling bouquet, cleanly, invisibly, without bruising the petals. My weekends belong to strangers' happiness. I love the work more than it loves me. It taught me that every couple carries a map. The way they lean, the private shorthand, the touch that answers a question no one asked out loud. It also taught me what happens when the map stops fitting the terrain. We'd been married 3 years. Not a lifetime, but long enough to have a playlist and a preferred corner table at Gianni. Long enough for my friends to say, "You lucked out, Nate," and for me to agree. Leela manages partnerships at a non-profit that puts books into classrooms. She can talk anyone into caring about paper. Her voice turns practical when she's nervous. One night I heard that voice at 10:52 p.m. down the hallway of our apartment as she told someone, "We should be more careful." When I asked who it was, she said, "Sasha from work, budget panic," and slid into bed smelling like sweet pepper and fresh rain, a fragrance I didn't recognize. A week later, a direct message arrived on my public portfolio account, the one brides-to-be used to ask if I can make their day look like a movie. The sender's name was Table 17. No profile photo, no small talk, just thistle and thread, speakeasy behind the flower shop on Alder, Thursdays. Ask for the red ledger and they'll show you the door. You'll find your answer there. My hands went cold. The message felt like it knew our hallway. I typed back, "Who are you?" and watched 3 gray dots appear, hesitate, disappear, reappear like a lighthouse trying to decide whether to save a ship. "I'm someone being lied to by the same person who's lying to you," came the reply. "I'm not a troll, I'm not selling anything. I don't want drama, I want daylight." Then a final line, "I'm sorry." That was the part that convinced me she was real. Thistle and thread is a front, but a pretty one. The florist in the window pretends it has nothing to do with the velvet corridor behind the counter. On Thursday, I went early because suspicion turns punctual. The shopkeeper glanced at my jacket, then my eyes. "Beautiful evening," she said. "Red ledger," I answered, mouth dry. Her smile altered by 2 degrees. She lifted a ledger with a red binding and tapped a blank page. Through the cooler, a steel door, a spill of chilled air and eucalyptus, a second door with a brass handle, the speakeasy sighed me in. Lighting low enough to forgive intentions, tables with names instead of numbers, jazz too soft to be an alibi. I sat at the bar with a seltzer and a borrowed mask of confidence. At 6:41, they came in through the velvet curtain like moths that understood fire but chose it anyway. Leela in the green dress I bought her last Christmas, the one she said made her feel like a punctuation mark. The man beside her in a slate suit that hinted at his tailor's name. He touched Leela's back with 2 fingers as if she were a piano he'd learned by heart. They walked to a small, half-moon booth near the wall of bottles. The hostess placed a brass card on the table. I could read it from where I sat, Clementine. They ordered with intimacy, not urgency. Leela laughed with her hand near her mouth, a modesty she deploys when she wants to look like the idea of a secret. The man's head tilted, his grin practiced. I recognized him after a moment's rearranging. His name was Evan. He'd been at one of Layla's fundraising galas, the kind of friend of the mission who donated evenings instead of time. I didn't take a photo. I don't bring work to wars. I watched for 4 minutes that lasted a year. When the host pulled the curtain aside again, a woman entered in a gray coat, her hair pinned with the kind of barrette you inherit, not buy. For a second, I thought she would head to Clementine and throw the room into theater. Instead, she stepped to the barstool to my left and asked for hot water and lemon. Her voice was steady like the part of the ocean that knows how to swim around a rock. She didn't look at me until the bartender left. Then she said, "I'm table 17. Well, my name is Iris. I wasn't sure you'd come." Up close, she looked like a person who had rehearsed honesty. Her hands were still. The lemon arrived in a white cup that fogged her glasses. "Thank you," I said, "because sometimes that's what you say when your life politely knocks." "I know the owner," she continued. "He loves my flower shop and I love his stubbornness, so he let me watch from the hallway last week like a neighbor. I didn't want to be in a situation that made me a spy. I didn't want to be this. But Evan," she faltered on the name, then straightened the syllables, "is my boyfriend. Was." She adjusted the barrette as if it were a steering wheel. "I thought you'd rather see than guess." "Why tonight?" I asked, keep my voice small. The jazz brushed our ankles. "Because Thursday belongs to Evan's client dinners." She didn't air quote with her fingers. The words did it for her. "Because you deserve facts. Because secrets rot both ends of the rope." We didn't go to the booth. We didn't stage a confrontation with witnesses. We sat, like two adults who had found the same trapdoor in different rooms and made a plan without punishments. We would ask them to meet us at my studio on Saturday afternoon. Neutral ground, plenty of light, no peppermint cocktails to confuse anyone's courage. Iris would invite Evan under the pretense of a mini-session for her shop's autumn campaign. I would invite Layla on the pretense of testing light for a winter wedding. The oldest trick, call it a rehearsal, and then tell the truth. I walked home without looking behind me. Leela arrived an hour later with her hair smelling the way my chest now felt. She kissed my cheek and said she was starving. We ate leftover lasagna and watched a silly show where strangers remodel houses to look like decisions. When she laughed, a tiny thing shattered and reassembled in me. I went to bed holding the clean part, the memory of her asleep on my shoulder 100 times before. Saturday came pretending to be innocent. My studio is a long rectangle with a brick wall that convinces couples they've always been interesting. At 2 o'clock, Iris arrived in that gray coat with a thin folder under her arm. "My mood board," she said, holding it up like a shield. We stood close enough to smell the tea on each other's breath, far enough to prove this wasn't a setup in the other sense. I noticed the way she looked around, a florist noticing light, a woman making sure she had exits. At 2:11, Leela walked in wearing a denim jacket over a black dress like a person who understood daylight. She kissed me, wary of lip gloss and tension. "So, which lens?" she asked, breezy. The door chimed again. Evan stepped in, carrying his own ego like luggage. He froze when he saw Leela. She froze when she saw Iris. People imagine explosions. What they don't expect is the quiet. "Hi," Iris said. "Let's all use names so we don't get lost." Leela's hand went to her necklace, a habit. Evan spoke first, because men who think they choreograph the room always race the silence. "What is this?" he asked. "It's the part where we stop pretending," I said. I kept my voice even, because the microphone of fear amplifies everything. No one raised their pitch. Leela tried an explanation that had probably seemed reasonable inside her head. This started as coffee, he was a donor, they didn't mean to, and ended with tears she'd been guarding. Evan wanted Iris to come outside where we could talk without an audience, ignoring that we were not an audience but a quorum. Iris didn't move. She said, "You can say what you need to say here. We're all grown." And so they did, or tried. Under the softbox light, we saw each other without flattery. Leela said she'd felt unseen in a life that kept making room for other people's pictures. I didn't rebut. You can win arguments and lose truth. Evan chose cowardice and called it confusion. Iris nodded once, like a judge who doesn't want to be. The conclusion wasn't elegant, but it fit. Leela agreed to a pause that ended up being a parting. Evan tried to salvage something rhetorical and left with a shrug he mistook for grace. Iris and I were two people in a studio that smelled like brick and electricity, a room that had just witnessed the end of a composite. "You okay?" she asked, after the door closed and the chime remembered how to be music. "I will be," I said. I felt 50 years old and 15 at once. We didn't hug. We didn't grab at consolation like a lifeline. We brewed coffee in the tiny kitchenette and sat on apple boxes, knees almost touching, breathing like you do after a long run when you don't want anyone to hear it. Iris showed me her mood board even though we didn't need to pretend anymore. Muted saffrons and storm blues, photos of hands around mugs, roses in that middle stage where they're most themselves. She told me about the flower market at 5 in the morning, the old man who taught her to spot a peony ready to forgive you. I told her about brides who fall in love more with their idea of silk than with the person wearing it. If this were a movie, we would have kissed among the backdrops. Real life let the kettle click. I walked Iris to the door and we stood a moment too long like kids outside a classroom after the bell. "Thank you for choosing light," I said. She smiled at that, an exhausted smile that still managed to recognize good weather when it saw it. The next weeks were dusting and paperwork and boxes that turned my side of the closet into a stub. Leela moved into a small apartment 3 stops away, a polite geography. We met once in a cafe to divide the last of the shared nouns. She cried and didn't apologize for it. I didn't hand her a napkin. She had hands. "I needed to feel awake," she said, which bruised. With him, it was like turning on a lamp in a room that already had windows, she added, which helped. "Maybe we were both asleep," I said. "Work makes me dream with my eyes open." We paid our lawyer to put the word irretrievable on a piece of paper. Doors did what doors do. Iris and I found friendship without chasing it. It arrived with bags of extra tulips and texts that asked nothing more than, "A good day." She invited me to the flower market at 5 one terrible morning when the city felt uninhabited. The warehouse filled with steam and murmurs. She navigated the aisles like a priest in a familiar chapel. She pressed a small bundle of freesia into my hands. "They smell like a wedding you actually want to go to," she said, grinning. We did not become reckless. We became precise. On a rainy Tuesday, I stopped by her shop with takeout boxes because soup is a form of mercy. We ate on overturned buckets and let the storm polish the street outside. Her hair had escaped its clip and framed her face like a decision. She asked if I wanted to see the back room where she dries lavender for winter. I followed her into the narrow space that smelled like patience. A single string of lights made a warm spine along the ceiling. "This is where I teach workshops," she said. "People come to tie ribbons and tell the truth." "Do you ever tie your own?" I asked. She looked down, smiling, and when she looked up, the question we'd been saving stood between us. I touched a stray curl near her temple with the backs of my fingers, the way you touch a match you don't intend to light. She leaned, not all the way, just enough to make it a conversation. I kissed her forehead like a promise to take my time. Her hands rose to my chest, not gripping, resting. We didn't rush the script. We wrote a new one with fewer stage directions. Our first real kiss waited until I was officially a man without a ring. It happened on her shop's back step at dusk, the city doing its trick with lights and possibility. We were mid-laugh about a customer who wanted roses that smelled like television. And then the space between us closed in a way that made the air admit it had always been conspiring. The kiss was slow enough to keep, firm enough to register. No music swelled except the kind life makes when it isn't trying too hard. We parted with a breath that felt like we'd finally joined the same sentence. Nights with Iris were built out of ordinary materials and care. We cooked like two refugees who discovered a new country, garlic freckling the pan, basil giving away its secrets, pasta tumbling like applause. She danced badly on purpose until I laughed myself whole. We curled on her couch under a blanket that smelled like her shampoo and rain. We didn't narrate the heat. We let it announce itself in the soft map of her hand at the back of my neck, my thumb tracing the delicate hinge of her wrist. When the fade to black came, it felt less like a cut and more like a door you close with your lips already smiling. Every so often, Leela texts me a line that carries a suitcase of regret and growth. "I started reading again," she wrote one night in January. "Turns out I was starving." I responded with a photo of the first book I loved as a kid, and she sent back a heart. "We're not friends. We're citizens of a country we left in peace." Evan reached out to Iris once with a note full of apology and adjectives, which is to say it was about him. She didn't reply. We ate clementines in the shop after closing and read the note aloud in funny accents until dignity felt welcome again. I kept shooting weddings, the honest ones, the complicated ones, the ones that believe themselves unique and are right. I learned to listen not only for laughter but for alignment. At one reception, an older couple danced in a corner to the sound of silverware. The woman leaned into the man like his shoulder had been designed for her by an architect. I took the picture and sent it to Iris from the band's break. She answered with a photo of a bouquet she'd just finished, ranunculus and rosemary, delicate and sturdy. "For your kitchen," she wrote, "and your mind." When I walk past thistle and thread now, I still smell eucalyptus and the high, ambivalent note of regret. But there's also something else. The memory of a night when strangers decided not to become villains, just people with choices. I don't hate the place. It's just a door disguised as another door. We all have those. The irony of my work documenting devotion while my own nearly dissolved didn't break me. It taught me the difference between performance and presence. Desire isn't the enemy of loyalty. Secrecy is. What passes the YouTube test of decency, hands at a waist, a laugh held close, two adults learning the temperature of a room, also passes my test now. Is it honest? Is it kind? Does it leave us more ourselves than we were? On the night I moved my last box into Iris's apartment, the one with the fire escape that looks like a ladder heaven forgot, I found a key on the windowsill tied with gray ribbon. "Late checkout," the tag read in her handwriting. "Early secrets, never again." I slid the key onto my chain and kissed her just inside the doorway, where all thresholds tell the truth. "Home?" I asked against her smile. "Home," she said, and pulled me in with both hands, as if every door we'd ever walked through had been waiting to open to this.